There we go. Welcome, everybody. We're going to give a couple minutes to people to gather, but if you arrived here, you're here for the Be On Air Network, our forum on podcasting. So we're so happy to have you here, and we're going to get started in just a quick moment. We're so happy it's not snowing in Cleveland, aren't we?
Yeah.
We've got our love to keep us warm. Okay, I think we're getting close. Let's see what we've got. Okay, well, we're not going to waste 1 minute, folks. So if you arrived here, we're so happy to have you. Welcome to the Be On Air Forum. My name is Linda Lejeski. I'm the National Employer Representative for the 7 campuses of the Be On Air Network. This series is presented to you by Career Services. Each of our campuses has a dedicated career service director who really is in the business of getting to know our students from the very beginning and helping them to grow and to recognize their vision and assist with placement when they reach the end of the road of their diploma program. We bring you together, our students, our alumni, and our aspiring pros, with the opportunity to inspire you, offer you a larger network, and introduce you to the pros. We are really completing our 3rd year, and it's just flabbergasting to me. If you've never heard that word, that means like, wow, I can't even believe it, that so many industry pros have made it a point to be a part of this bi-weekly webinar, bring their expertise to the table, be available for open mic Q&A, and take that opportunity to even network with you above and beyond the forum that you attend here. So we're so glad that you have all joined us, and that we really want you to know that if you have the time, we would love for you to join us on the Be On Air YouTube channel, check out our library, and meet all of our fabulous guests and gain a lot of knowledge from those episodes. So I'm not sure if all of you know this, but I read a very interesting statistic today, and that is that 47% of all people over the age of 12 listen to at least one podcast a month. And that's just exceptional. You know, I have to say that over my 6 years with the Be On Air Network, we've all been talking about the growth of podcasting, but to really look at a statistic like that really points out just how much it's grown and how different audio and radio and receiving information really is. And that is just one of the many reasons that I'm very excited that you've joined us here tonight when we take a look at making 2025 the year that you launch your own podcast. We are really, really lucky tonight to have our 2 wonderful alum joining us for this podcast. Leah Haslage is a 20-year veteran in the entertainment industry and media industry. It's hard to believe, Leah, because you look like 21, but it's really remarkable. Thanks, yeah, you're welcome. Leah is an alum in our Cleveland campus. She's also been an on-air talent in both radio and TV. She's served on many boards. She's an award winner, and her pathway, she's really all about Cleveland. I want to say that we love Cleveland, but her path has taken her to be the senior producer, one of the senior producers at Evergreen Podcasts. And in that role, she really does a lot to create. Her creativity really shines through for these podcasts. But one of the podcasts that she produces, well, actually, I think she said there's 3 of them, is for a gentleman by the name of Jim Maroose. And Jim is considered the top podcast in the banking industry. I mean, he's an exceptional man. He's from right outside of Cleveland, Ohio, but he is right at the top of the ranking when you're thinking of the banking industry. And our Leah is the senior producer of his podcast. So she's going to talk a little bit more about that. Our webinar tonight is moderated by Tony Lopez, and most of you know our Tony. He is an alum as well out of Illinois Media School. He has his own podcast. He's also an on-air talent. You can find Tony in virtually every different arena. He recently spoke at Flava's Podcast Summit in Chicago. So he too, is an expert in this arena, and the 2 of them together are really going to bring you a lot of information and give you that opportunity to grow so that you too can be successful in 2025. It's so hard to even say that, isn't it?
I know. It's so weird to hear it.
But anyhow, as we get started, I want to ask you this question. Why do you want to start a podcast? What's your motivation? What's your niche? There's going to be a lot of great information here tonight, exchanged between Tony and Leah, and a chance for Q&A at the end. But I want you to really give a lot of thought to the things you're going to be hearing and take some notes. You can rewatch this on the forum, right, on the YouTube channel. And we'd love to have you join the Be On Air Podcast Network as well. So there'll be more information on that. But for now, Tony, I'm going to say take it away, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Linda and Leah. Linda's intros are...
I love it. I mean, I love Linda so much.
Every time we do these, I just wait. I got a bag of popcorn. I just let her do it, and then we start. So, Linda, top 5-star once again.
Thank you. Have a good time. I'm going down below.
I feel great thinking that I look 21 now. Thanks, Linda.
I feel like I've known you since you're 21. Maybe I should say that. Okay, toodaloo.
Very nice. Well, thank you, Linda, for the introductions, of course. And I just want to remind everyone out there that we are going to be having a Q&A session towards the last 15 minutes of the forum. And so we're going to open up the doors for you guys to give us some questions or some questions for Leah, as well as maybe any commentary we'll put out there. I know Linda will be taking care of the questions in the chat, and she will post them on there for us to read and respond to. But Leah, I am excited to talk to you today. You're in the field that I am in. A lot of the times when we do these forums, I'm learning, and so now I'm just happy to talk to you, ask you some questions, and hopefully dive into this conversation with you, and just talk about your journey. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Tony, and thanks everyone for being here. I'm excited to come back and talk to everyone about my career and podcasting, because there's a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. Well, we can start from we'll start in the beginning. Obviously you went to school, and the field you went to school for has evolved so much. But first, talk about your journey, talk about school, how that went for you, what you did to start your journey in media.
Yeah. When I was at Ohio Media School, which when I was there, it was Ohio Center for Broadcasting. So I still want to say OCB all the time. So I slip and say it, I'm sorry in advance. I know it's OMS. But at that time, podcasting wasn't really a thing. It was maybe like an underground thing, but we did not have those classes, right? It was radio and television focused. And prior to that, I had dabbled in the industry. I had been a Choose or Lose news correspondent for MTV and Cox Cable. I was an arena host for the Cleveland Gladiators, which I was still doing at the time. I went back to school and went to OMS. But it's crazy to see the evolution of the industry. Even television and radio is so different from what it was in 2011, 2012 when I was in school. So I guess for me, going to OMS was so impactful because it did give me that firsthand experience working in the control room and working with equipment that you may not have got elsewhere right away. And I had internships immediately at WGAR, our country station, and then at Fox 8 in the morning, kicking it with Kenny. And I learned so much from there. And it led to me getting hired from another freelance gig at TV20, the City of Cleveland government news channel, to be a reporter and show host and producer. And my career has kind of gone from there. So I could go really in depth with my career, so I'm not sure where I should stop with that without being annoying and long-winded. But when it came to podcasting, I decided to leave the City of Cleveland after almost a decade and take the leap into this area I hadn't really explored yet. And luckily, the team at Evergreen took me on in the end of 2019, and podcasting blew up because months after I got hired on, a pandemic hit, and suddenly we were all at home, and it's just crazy to see the evolution just in 5 years of podcasting.
Well, I mean, you led me right to the next point. I think we've all had our journeys. Most of us that have been in the industry for a while, and then 2020 happened.
Yeah.
And 2020 evolved a lot of things that we do in the industry, and one of the biggest ones, obviously, was podcasting. Because like you said, people were home and trying to figure out content creation, or how to continue to do their shows. I mean, you name it. That a lot was happening in 2020. But, Leah, you have a very decorated career in 2020. Why do you think podcasting blew up, besides the obvious? What do you think has now, what has been that lifeline for podcasting, for it now to be one of the top 3 things that you do listen to, right? I mean, everyone has a podcast. We're not even talking about media people. We're talking about lawyers. We're talking about real estate agents. Like, people are now podcasting.
Well, you kind of touched upon it by saying everyone was home, so they had a chance to create, right? So, we had to pivot fast with our industry, right? Being at Evergreen, and anyone else in media, you had to figure out fast what equipment you had to use and ship out to host, producers, engineers, try to make it work. Like, think of all the newscasts, right? People were doing it live from their homes. And so that there's one aspect of that. It's very Who Moved My Cheese, which is one of my favorite books. Like, you had to act fast and you go with the cheese, or you're just going to fail, right? Yeah. But 2, you got to be home and create. So you had time to explore, right? And some people weren't trying to do podcasts right away just to monetize or be a thing. It was just like, hey, I have this niche interest, and so I'm just going to talk about it. And then for some people, the next thing it blew up, and they're making all this money off of it now, right? They're having a whole career off of it. Actors and actresses, and musicians, they couldn't go out and play live or be on movie sets and all that. So like, well, I'm a brand in itself. Let me create something. And then they started, creating things that became huge hits. And so I think having that downtime allowed people to explore the creativity, but also find new technological ways of creating that they may not have thought about before. And connecting with people, because it's all about connecting community. You can't be in person on a set or, in a concert hall, whatever. So this was another way of trying to communicate and connect and educate, which is, I think, a big part of podcasting too, is educating people.
Yeah, I mean, you spend your time listening to what they're saying, and obviously the content is not just people blabbing. There is a purpose behind everyone's podcast, and so that's a good point there. Leah, I think the biggest thing when we talk about podcasts, I mean, we just want to break it down for those that are trying to podcast or are thinking about doing a podcast. What exactly they want to do. So one of the questions I'll ask you is, like, what are the key factors to consider when choosing a podcast niche? Like, what should you think about when you're starting to create?
Great question. So think about your passion. What are you passionate about? What do you love to do? Start making a list of it. You might have more than one interest, but you want to kind of hone that in, right? If you're not entirely sure, ask your family and friends. Ask the people super close to you. Like, hey, if you had to consider me an expert on something or have expertise in some area, what would you consider it to be? You might be surprised, right? Mm-hmm. You might realize that you have a wealth of knowledge of baseball that other people would nerd out with you on. And that could be a way to start your podcast and see where it might go, right? I mean, for me, the show I host and produce is Bridechilla, and I nerd out on weddings, and I want to help educate people on how to save money and time and stress when planning an important day in their life, right? But because I have a passion for that industry and for helping others, and I could geek out all day, it makes sense, right? So think about that. What do you have a passion for? Is it sports? Is it entertainment? Is it fitness? Is it, and the more niche, the more you can get people, I swear. Like, if you are an expert in this, like one specific area of Star Wars, for example, it's not just Star Wars as a whole, right? There's a lot of Star Wars fans, but if you're a Star Wars nerd on this one specific topic, go for it. Like, you're going to find your people. That's the thing. Do what you know. That's
very, very true. I'll join the conversation with you in regards to that. I did a sports podcast with 15-year NBA veteran Kendall Gill, and it was a sports, and everyone has a sports podcast, right? But then we just drove away from that specific general topic, and our passion, actually, as you mentioned, find that is boxing, and so we switched it over to boxing. Mm-hmm. Numbers skyrocketed on YouTube, skyrocketed because you found that passionate fan base, right? that niche where people who are looking for boxing content, they have to find it online. And so you make a good point when you talk about that. So that's good.
And a good point to you as well, that you play with it, right? You might start off with one topic or one interest, but you might find a new avenue that works better for you as far as numbers go and success goes. Or maybe there's a way to marry the two, no pun intended, being the bright chilla chick. But like there might be a way to combine those forces, right? So I think that's a great testament to how you can find your path too. Go play.
Yeah, no, for sure. Hey, you have to work it, right? You got to find out what that looks like for you. What also too with that, you're trying to find that niche, as you mentioned. But what are the best ways to research potential listener interests? Like, how do you think? What's the best way, for you that you found what people are talking about or listening to?
So everyone's going to approach this differently, but how I approached it was, when my last wedding podcast was Weddings Unveiled with Leah, and we had just entered the pandemic and we were home, and my boss said, "Hey, we're home. You all had pitched, ideas, make an episode, send it to me. Let's see if this works." And because it's something I have a passion for, I created Weddings Unveiled. I interviewed the woman that was my wedding planner when I had been married, and that ended up being episode 1. They loved it. And so, that's one way of going about it. If you're unsure of what topic you might want to do, again, reach out to family and friends that know you best and say, "Hey, I would like to do a podcast on this. Do you think it's something people would listen to? Do you have people that love your niche stuff?" Go to Facebook community groups, Reddit, forums like that, your tribe would be at, that would be the listeners, right? Fill out a Survey Monkey and send it out to people, see what they might think. Word of mouth, email blast. There's so many different ways. It just kind of depends on, one, your communication style, your comfortability factor, and then what your area of interest is. Because like for Bride Chilla, a Facebook community group or Instagram, TikTok might work. But we'll just go back to Star Wars because it's on my head, Reddit or, some other forum might work better. So really kind of figure out what your community tends to go towards and start there.
Leah, I'm getting the feeling you're a Star Wars fan.
I'm really not, but people call me Princess Leia all the time because my name's Leah. So I don't know. So when I started at Evergreen, not long after I started, we had got a Star Wars podcast, Rebel Force Radio. They're not with Evergreen anymore. It's a great show, but they had 6-figure a month numbers in downloads. I mean, they were, and right as the pandemic was hitting, I was with them at our Comic-Con in Cleveland, Wizard World. And so they were super niche in that genre. So that's why it kind of comes to mind when I talk about podcasting, because they did so well and they had such a community based, and they're so specific in their area that they tend to always kind of come to mind when I'm talking about podcasting as a successful, example for people.
Well, I love Star Wars, so.
Okay. I'm Leah, not Leia.
right. Leah, not Leia. No, that's awesome.
But that's why I bring up Star Wars.
Hey, it's fine. Keep bringing it up. It's fine. It's a great example. Awesome example. When it comes to, we talked about creation, kind of looking at, your audience, kind of finding out what that niche is, then it gets to the actual podcast and actually doing one and figuring out how to disperse episodes is a difficult thing, right? Because you want to do it right. And sometimes it's very experimental, but for you, what is a good episode structure to start off at, right? How would you approach it, I guess, at the beginning of it?
So my focus is always interview, the interview kind of style, where some people might want to do more of a storytelling where they have sound effects and do a whole, So I'm going to focus right now on what I know best, and that's more the interview style. And with that, the best way to do your interview, always obviously set up with who the guest is, why this episode is going to be important, why you need to listen to this, because you're going to be gaining something from it. You want to tell people what they're going to learn, why this is going to benefit them off the top. You don't want to bore them and be like, what is this about again? Just let them know from the top. And then from there, go with, so right now I have an episode I'm working on with legal counsel when it comes to weddings and that, right? So for example, you're going to start with your basics of like, okay, marriage licenses and contracts, right? But then you're going to flow into hot topics. You're going to flow into the really meaty stuff, right? Now that you've got them, get them hooked, right? Mm-hmm. And then kind of go from there. So your structure is going to be slightly different depending on what your show style is. I'm sure with you, for example, like tell us how your thing works with sports, because sports is going to be a different aspect than when it comes to an interview with an expert for advice on how to plan a day, right?
Yep.
So how would you do it with sports?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a great point because every I guess genre has a different way of going about it. And with sports, you go with the current events. Sports happens every day, so you're talking about the most current topics, most current news, and that's already a good thing to talk about because you're talking about what's current. But you still can't be stale and only talk about that. You got to engage your audience and be able to have them, look forward to something besides the current news. So for my example, what we do is we'll do like a top 5 segment of the best boxers of all time, or we'll go into, a topic where Kendall and I disagree completely on something. And it's the, 10-minute debate on this specific topic. Or the last thing, one thing that I've incorporated recently is Kendall Gill's story time, because he was, as a former NBA player, he played against Michael Jordan. He has 50 billion stories about him facing Michael and the greats of this era. So we'll just sit there and just listen to him,
Yeah, right.
People love that because they're just like, wow, like, what about Michael? And did he say anything? And we get those comments all the time. So definitely depends on genre. But I think, as you mentioned, you gotta find out what exactly your main content is going to be, and then divide it up, find out different ways to create segments, and most importantly, as you mentioned, is engaging the audience.
Yeah, because every type of show is gonna be different. So like I produced Pit Pass Moto when I first started, which is a podcast for motocross enthusiasts. So we'd open the show where the host would talk about the latest news from the weekend's races, and then we go into the guest. So you have that kind of format. Some people open up with like, hey, here's a fact or a question of the day, and then stay tuned because after the break we'll give the answer to this question, see if you know it, type of deal. There's so many different ways that you could format it, but it depends on your preference of style for one thing. So, and that takes time. You're going to develop that over time, right? And your show can change. Like you said, you went from basketball or baseball, basketball,
sports
to boxing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So once you figure it out, because like I know with the motocross show, we played around with it a few different ways over time just to see like what the audience would prefer, and so keep that in mind. Don't think, okay, this isn't working, so it's not going to work. No, that might not be working, or it's working okay, but what can you do differently? Do you have any other interests with this, right? Maybe you need to bring on a co-host to play off of. Maybe that's going to bring your show to the next level. You have someone to work off of. Maybe you need to make it more of a roundtable than a one-on-one discussion. Like, there's so many different ways you can play with it. So don't be shy or afraid to play with it. Don't think you're a failure off the rip, or you have to do this one way of doing it, because you don't. There's so many different ways you can do it.
Yeah.
And think about the shows that you love. What do you like to watch and listen to? Use that as inspiration to guide you to find your style, what works for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you kind of talked about my next question here, or leading me into it. When it comes to just not only you, right? Mm-hmm. And you did touch a little bit on guests and interviewing and so forth, but how important are guests on a podcast? We look at all these podcasts right now, all the famous people, from Joe Rogan, and many different examples, and it's just not them. It's usually somebody in that studio with him where he's able to not only have his content, but now we're interested because of who he has on, right? So how important are guests on a podcast, and how often should you have them when you're first starting or if you're tenured?
Great question. So obviously the bigger the name, the bigger the numbers are going to be, right? We saw what happened with Rogan, with his guests, with Alex Cooper and Call Her Daddy. The bigger the name that you can get, the better your numbers do tend to do. And not just famous people per se. So say you are doing a medical show and you have the leading expert in, I don't know medical stuff, but like the leading expert of infectious disease, right? So anyone in the medical community can be like, whoa, they got this person, and especially if the person never does interviews or rarely does one, right? That's even bigger, right? So you got the exclusive. Everyone wants exclusive. So, yes. So think about that. But also, even if they're not the biggest name, do they have a big following? Do they have a lot of respect in your field or community? Because maybe they're not the biggest household name, but they have 11.k followers on Instagram. So like, you have to consider those things too. Do you like their work? Do you think they have something to say that your audience could gain from it? Maybe they're going to find out who that person is because of you. So there's a few different ways to go about it. Definitely make sure you're getting people that do know what they're talking about and will be engaging, because there's nothing worse than interviewing someone. And you know where I'm going to go with. I think you know where I'm going to go with this. Oh my God, there's nothing worse than interviewing someone and you're like, oh, so tell me about this. And they're just like, yeah.
It's pretty bad.
It's just one word answers, or it's like super short and you're just like pulling teeth. No one wants to listen to it. Just scrap that episode because it's going to be a waste of time. So make sure you're getting someone that is reputable, that is going to be engaging, and that you think that people will need to listen to, whether they're famous or not, because everyone does kind of have something to say, right? But you don't want someone and you don't want the other way around too. Like the super long-winded is just talking to hear themselves talk. You don't want that either, but
absolutely.
I think you kind of know who your guest should be, but do your vetting, because people are going to come out to you. Like once you have a show, people are going to reach out to you and be like, hey, I'd love to be on your show. And you might think that they're something and then find out that they're not. So do your homework too.
Yep. Yeah, and you made a great point. We talked about the celebrities, right, and their podcasts, and when they bring a big name out on their podcast, numbers skyrocket. One of the biggest ones at the beginning of the year was Shannon Sharp's Club Shay Shay with Cat Williams interview. It's the most watched podcast on YouTube, right? It's ridiculous because of the content that was provided.
Mm-hmm.
We're not gonna dive into it, but it was a crazy show.
Mm-hmm.
But for people who are not celebrities, you made a good point about the following, right? Get if you have somebody with a following, that's all it's going to do is help you, right?
Yeah.
Their audience is going to tap in to your platform, wherever you have it, and it's definitely something to consider. But always do that groundwork, as we mentioned, and making sure that you have that platform growing, and then you can get these guests that do have those numbers because you're growing with them.
Yeah.
It's a good point that you did make, Leah. With guests, obviously, you have to prepare your guests too.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to just say, hey, come on my podcast, sit down, put a mic in front of them, and that's it, right? So you want to prepare them. Leah, how do you best prepare your guests when they come on? What's a good strategy for you that you've found that works for you?
So there's two different methods, obviously, if you're going to be in person versus virtual. So for right now with virtual, I always make sure I we have like a standard boilerplate that we've put together. That way it's just spelled out in bullet points with, we use Riverside.fm for our recordings, which is great. It's kind of like Zoom, but better audio and video quality. And so we'll send the link to Riverside and make sure you are on Chrome, because Riverside isn't supported with like a Firefox or Internet Explorer and ... right? And then I'll put the talking points. And so I won't give away everything to them, but I'll give away most of the things. That way, they're not overly prepared either, because there's nothing worse either than someone overly prepared and everything sounds like it's scripted and they're reading from a thing and it's not engaging.
Oh, unpersonable.
So yeah, you want it to be like it's a conversation over coffee or cocktails with a friend or colleague, right?
Yeah.
And that's the most engaging when it comes to interview style, right? And so then you'll just give talking points and leave it open to them to say, hey, if there's anything that you'd like to talk about, let me know. I'll make sure that we include it in there. And send it to them and let them review it. And I try to do it a day plus in advance, depending. But the thing with the guests, when you're bringing them on, they're going to know the stuff that you're asking them, right? You're not going to throw a curveball at them. If it's a sports show, you're not going to ask them about the Ukraine-Russia conflict. It's not going to be something out of the blue. So but yeah, to give them some bullet points, so they have direction of where you're going from, especially if it's something that you think that they will know, but they might need to have a little extra time to think about their answer, right? Like the final question I ask on Bridezilla, for example, I always do like a fun pop culture question at the end. So I usually ask, what is your favorite celebrity and or royal wedding? Or what is your favorite movie or TV show with a wedding? Something along those lines. So I always make sure I include which one of those questions at the end. That way they have time to kind of marinate on it and think about it. Because that's not one of those questions that they might be able to pull out of thin air right away. Maybe they can, maybe they're as nerdy as I am when it comes to that kind of stuff. But that's something, you want to prep your guest on. But just give them the basics. Let them know this is the direction I'm going to head. Because when you're talking about boxing, your guest might think that you're going to go in this direction as far as their career and where they see themselves going. But you might want to talk about their career and then the past and all these past legends that may have influenced them. And so that's, give them maybe a heads up that this is the direction I'd like to go in, but it's open per our discussion. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Absolutely. I do all of that.
Do you?
No, I don't. I mean, some of it I do. But that's great. Yeah, you have to prepare your guests without a doubt. I mean, you want to have a comfortable conversation. The one thing you don't want is having that awkwardness, where the guest is not, comfortable with a question or a potential topic. So you have to clear those bases before you get them on the show. And it's great insight.
And let them know if it's going to be not just audio, but also video, in which most of podcasting now is podcasting, right? We're a video centric now. And some people still don't know if it's going to also be video. So they're not prepared. And they're kind of like, like I'm doing this interview and now I look like this and I have to go out like that and my background's a mess and whatever. So make sure if you're going to be doing video as well, that they're prepared ahead of time, because that is a big deal.
For sure. Linda does these forums on the week that I don't get a haircut. So I'm always worried to host these.
Yes, start coordinating with Linda, your haircut calendar.
I'm just kidding, Linda. We're talking to Leah here, host of Bridezilla, and also OMS grad and a very tenured talent in media. We're happy to have her here. Leah, we're talking about all this, but you need equipment, right?
Yes.
You need stuff, all right? And so for a beginner, right? What basic equipment should they have? What's worked for you, I guess, to get to where you're going?
So kind of depending on how much you want to put into it from the get-go, right? If you're just dipping your toe in the water and you kind of want to see how this is, if you have a good laptop with a solid, built-in camera and mic, have earbuds preferably, or, headphones, you can do it from there. But as you grow and build, or if you're really serious about this, I love my Blue Yeti mic. I have a webcam. You can't see it, but I have like a ring light. I did just get other lights for the background I have not set up yet. So there's different things like that. But, equipment is constantly, in the last 5 years, I can't tell you how much it's changed. The equipment's getting better. It's getting to be a better price point too, because I think the supply and demand of it all, right? So you can find options out there. You can just easily do some research. But yeah, a webcam, Blue Yeti mic, a ring light, next step up.
Yeah. And what programs do you use to record your audio, and if you're doing video as well, as incorporated with that?
Yeah, so we currently use at Evergreen Riverside.fm, and it's been great. And that's for audio and video. And they're constantly updating and doing more and more options. Like you can record clips off of your full video now. They are offering transcription services, which I haven't really used yet. I have other transcription services, which actually I want to bring that up. That's an important point. Transcripts are important. Not everyone realizes that yet, but they are. There's a myriad of services you can use. I use Rev, Smart Transcribers, Swell, AI. Riverside now offers it, depending on if you want to do strictly AI, which you might have to do a little extra work on going back and fixing all the misspellings and grammar, or human transcription, which might cost a little bit more, but will be a lot more beneficial and sufficient in the end, save you time. But transcription is important because of accessibility. because of SEO. And in post, as a producer, myself and the creative team with marketing and social will pull quotes from it and use it for social content, for just in the description, ways to tease things. I have clients, like with the banking show that I produce, they use those transcripts to write white papers and other things that they need for their website and to give to their other clients. So transcriptions are really important. Make sure you include that with your equipment and services that you have.
That's so key what you mentioned. Besides the podcast, getting the equipment right and doing the content, there's another side to this, and that's post. You just mentioned it, right?
Yeah,
you have to be able to post the content, but not only posting it on Spotify or whatever platform you use, right? There's got to be a way also, as you're building, because this is we're talking about. There's got to be a way that you also engage the audience, weekly. And so really a really common theme that we see in podcasting, at least now in the past 2 years, is you put your full podcast up on your platform. And then during the week, you're taking clips, minute, 90 seconds, whatever that looks like for you. You're using a transcriber, right? You got font, and you're having a small clip of maybe one of the hottest points of the show, right? Or the hottest topic of the show. And then you build those 3-4 reels a week. Tell people to go check in if you want more, right? Is that something you do with your show, Leah? And do you think that's something that really works?
Yeah. So, I work on a few different shows, and every show is so different in how they are. Sure. So, like with the banking show, for example, that's a branded podcast that we have with Evergreen, and Jim hires an outside team to do all of his social, but we work together as a team where once the audio and the full video is ready, I sent it to his other team, and they will create reels and shorts, audiograms, various social posts, depending if it's going to be on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, because all of those sizes and stuff are going to be different. You have to consider all of that and the look and feel. So, and then that gets posted weekly on social and in email, e-blasts. So then, like with Brightzilla, we take a clip, an audio clip, and we create an audiogram with the guest photo. And every Monday we have a new episode. So that will go out promoting that guest. And it's a little quick, like 30-second soundbite to kind of hook them in. And then from there, we'll take the quotes and we'll make other graphics and stuff like that. So it kind of depends on how much work you want to put into it, but there's so much you can do with that content. And important to know also, you can recycle content. Just because an episode went live a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, take that clip and re-put it out there. You mentioned the Cat Williams interview. That was early this year, but because of what happened with Diddy, guess what? Viral, blew up. And that was from like 9 months ago. So don't be afraid to repurpose any content either. At the end of the year, do a best of and pull clips from, various episodes. And that's a whole new episode right there. So there's many ways you can play if you just leave yourself open to that opportunity, but know that it's okay to recycle the content too. Once it's out there doesn't mean it's done. You can create new social posts. Now that there are reels and shorts, take that and make it one, right? Which maybe you didn't have that opportunity a year ago, but that topic is still relevant. That person's still relevant. It's evergreen, if you will. So
look at that. Look at that. It's perfect. It's perfect. And I talk about that. I talk about that post part because I think it's very important. Do you use CapCut or anything like? I know you use in Evergreen. There's different ways that you're posting, but do you use those apps to cut small things for your personal show or things of that nature? To some anything that I guess that would expedite a lot of your footage that you've taken?
So great question. And I will say in full disclosure, I have the opportunity to not have to do that right now because there's an amazing team, production team of engineers and social media and marketing that I don't deal with that right now. So I can't give an honest answer. I'm heavier in the content and other parts of the production, but I'm sure that there are, there's things like with Canva and PixArt, and there's so many different apps and resources now that you can use, and it's ever evolving. So, if you want to email me at lhaslage@evergreenpodcast.com, I can answer that later when I talk to the people that do it. But unfortunately, I do not know the answer to that. But But as far as distributing the podcast episodes, we use Megaphone. Some people use Libsyn. And for people not familiar, Megaphone is a hub. So you use that to then distribute your podcast to Spotify, Apple, wherever you might have people listening to your podcast. So keep that in mind too. That's a very important component in the post, like once you do the interview, where you're going to let it go live and then promote.
There's many different things you guys can do. I mean, podcasting is such it's an open lane for so many different things. And it can open up business opportunities too for you if you do it well. And Leah, I'm not going to ask you to in depth about marketing or anything like that, but just if you can touch a little bit about how that opportunity is there for you to do marketing, for you to get monetized on different platforms. This is not only you get on a mic and talk and post, you can make money from this. So and from your experience, it can happen.
It definitely can happen. And there's a lot of different ways. So sponsorships is always number one, obviously, for podcasts, right? Yeah. And with that, think about the companies that you want to align with personally, because you don't have to take a sponsorship from someone that you don't feel comfortable with, right? You're going to find who you flow with. But go after the companies that align with what your show is.
Yeah.
And, so like with Bridechilla, for example, one of our sponsors is Caraway Cookware. Another sponsor is Last Bubbles, which is champagne and wine. Those make sense in a bridal space, right? People are moving in together and cooking together. People are doing registries and registering for cookware. Last Bubbles, obviously, people are popping champagne for all the different wedding events leading up to the big day and on the big day. So that's a good alignment, right? When I was producing Pit Pass Moto America was our biggest sponsor. And 5 years later, they're still sponsoring the show. And Moto America is a huge name in motocross. It's the equivalent of NASCAR for car racing, right? So you want to reach out to companies, and eventually some will come to you as well, right? And just find things that will align with your topic, your audience. Like Dude Wipes, I think, was a sponsor at one point for Pit Pass Moto, but like, you're out on the road, man, right? You're on the trail. Like, that makes sense. And it's a very male centric podcast. So just think about those kind of things. Another way to monetize is merchandise. I can't wait for Bridechillas to launch after the new year, but that's a way you can make additional money as well, and branding and promotion at the same time, right? And then there's always affiliate links with Amazon and other websites, Target, Walmart, whomever. You can do affiliate links within your description, your posts, and on Instagram. And every time someone clicks and purchases from that, you can make some money from that way too. So there's a handful of different ways you can monetize.
Yeah, absolutely. There's different. You want to go search them. You want to go find out. Don't just post. Do research and optimize all the opportunities that you possibly can when it comes to it. In about 3 minutes or so, we're going to open up the floor for questions that Leah can answer here for us. If you have any questions about podcasting, please tap in, talk to us. I know there's probably some right now. I haven't checked the chat yet, but I know Linda's getting those ready for us, so we're going to tap in a bit. But Leah, give us we're going to have fun now, okay?
Okay. I was already having fun, but
there you go.
On.
Okay. Nice. Give us your most, I guess I'll ask you, what's been your most iconic moment as a podcaster, or maybe the most iconic segment, or a moment you cannot ever forget on the mic with a guest, something that you'll never forget. Do you have one?
With podcasting?
Yeah.
When it comes to podcasting, I guess what sticks in my mind immediately is recently I had designer Haley Page on Bridechilla, and that to me is a huge deal because not only have I been a huge fan of hers for a long time, but she's now getting to be a designer again because she won a huge legal battle against her former employer. So she wasn't allowed to be a designer for a few years, and it created a huge shakeup in the wedding industry. So the fact that I got to have her on the show recently is a huge deal. And that's the first thing that sticks in my mind. But there's been so many amazing moments over the past 5 years. And And over the past 5 years, I've produced 11 different shows. So there's a lot, but that's the first thing that comes to mind. It's one of the most current. So
nice. Well, what the audience doesn't realize is we just did a podcast right now.
Right? That's what I was thinking too. Like, this really is a podcast also. A podcast and a vodcast. It's on YouTube.
Yeah. And now this is your most iconic moment right here.
This is. Tony nailed it.
Tilo and Leah. There you go.
What's yours, Tony? I'm curious. Have you had one?
Mine was, I had former world champion Roy Jones Jr. on the show. He was considered one of the greatest of all time. Well, he still is considered one of the greatest of all time. But Roy Jones is a 1990s boxer. He moved up in weight classes and won all these belts. I was so nervous during the interview. I just remember just like trying to ask him a technical question about boxing, and I'm fumbling, just trying to get through the words. And he's just looking at me like, go ahead, just say it, son. Go ahead, just say it. But I'm just like, oh, it's Roy. So that's awesome. That's my most iconic one for sure.
Very cool.
So, well, we're here. I see questions on the screen. We're going to go right to them right now. We have Joelle Dusek, I hope I'm saying that right, who says, what's the process for distribution? I understand that audio is hosted and fed into a distros like Podbean, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Do they host also or need to set up a separate RSS site?
Okay, so this, I'll be honest, I don't have to deal with this end of things as far as setting this all up and working on that. I do know that we have an RSS feed for each show. All I know is that we host through Megaphone, which again is the hub for all of those that you listed. So I think if you work with a site like that or Libsyn, there's just the one, but I don't want to give you a wrong answer. So sorry, I can't be more help on that one. But
yeah, and there's different hubs you can use, Joelle.
Yeah,
you can always dump audio in to different hubs, and they can spread them out to different platforms. More importantly, always make sure you do have an RSS, as Leah mentioned. Mm-hmm. And then if you have platforms on all those like YouTube and Spot, put it on all of them.
Yeah,
all of them for sure. If the hubs are not working, individually, that's obviously time consuming, but there's definitely different hubs you can use. So,
and having something like Megaphone's great because not only is it just the source to let the episode go live, but you can watch how the episodes. I'm blanking on the word and the term right now. What am I looking for, Tony? When you're looking at the graphs of the episode downloads.
Oh, your demographics. I know what you're talking about too. Yes.
Yeah, you can do all of that as well from that, which is great because you can see how your episode downloads are going. Are they listening more from Spotify or Apple? The demographic of the area they're listening from, and so forth. So
metrics.
Something like that's better than metrics. Thank you.
Yeah. And on the screen too, we do. I did forget to mention we do have a Be On Air podcast network for those of you that are listening. If you are interested, you definitely can put your podcast on the podcast network. That podcast network distributes to all of them, to all the platforms. When we handle that for you by just going in. So if you're interested in that, definitely let us know. Write it in the chat or email us, and we can get you started on the Be On Air podcast network. Linda,
and back when Tony and I were there was not a podcasting station. Did you work for the radio station though? Because I did the classic rock show.
I did. Well, I was on the sports in Chicago.
Yeah,
I was on the sports station.
Yeah.
So there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, the evolution.
Crystal Field, it's my best friend. Crystal, she writes, what are the top 3 priorities before launching? Goal is monetization, not a hobby podcast.
Oh, the goal is money and not hobby. 3 priorities. I would say 1, make sure you have enough episodes banked and ready to go before launching. So you're not scrambling to get guests, especially if you're deciding if you want to be, are you weekly? Are you bi-weekly, bi-monthly, so forth? You want to have some consistency there too. So I definitely would have a few episodes banked, ready to go and launch. That way you're not, again, scrambling. Make sure you have your website, your social media, any kind of promotional stuff ready to go also. So you can promote the show and you have a way to direct people to both, right? Because you want to also gain that community and that fan base. The third, Goal is money and not hobby. Start reaching out to sponsors, even with the show not having numbers and being huge yet. At least start putting the bug in people's ears, maybe.
Yeah.
What about you, Tony? What do you think?
I mean, I think number one is know what you're going to talk about, right? Obviously, topic, subject, genre.
Mm-hmm.
Find your genre first. You want to know what it is you're going to talk about, and make sure you like it. Make sure you like it, because you can find yourself in a position where you do something right, and then you're not as interested as you thought you were.
Yes,
you have to talk about it. You do not want to do that.
That's a great point, Tony.
Yeah. So
you might love something, but not enough to nerd out every single week about it.
Absolutely. I most definitely, you want to be able to find that that genre that you're passionate about. I think the second thing is, make sure you have your resources, right? Get the equipment that you need. That should be a priority. Get your mic. And if it's a basic setup from the laptop, Leah with her Yeti mic, right? And then, get yourself a pair of headphones and get the basics of it. I think, that's the second thing. You need your equipment. And third, find your community, right? Whether that be, the people that like your topic or your genre, and make sure that community, you can find some guests or find maybe a co-host in the midst of that. I think that's going to help you a lot, because you need support, right? You're posting, right? And you want to be able to have that demographic kind of garner into you and say, you know what, I like what this is. So know that community, find that space, and then you go from there. I think those are my top three for sure.
Those are great. I love that Joel said he did Hot Latin from Denver. That's awesome.
Nice. Yes.
That's
nice.
Great.
That's pretty dope.
All of us that did radio. No, those are great tips, Tony. I agree. We should have started with yours, because then yours would lead to mine, and then you launch.
There you go. Boom.
Go backwards. Like, listen to Tony, then rewind and go back to me, and then launch.
Absolutely. Linda has a question. She said, what is the best way to get in touch with you, Leah?
The best way to get in touch with me is Haslage at evergreenpodcast.com. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook and Blue Sky at Cleveland Leah. And yeah, love to hear from you.
Cool. I'm sure I'm sure Linda is going to put your information up there as well for everybody out there. Yeah. I don't see any other questions right now, so I'll ask one. If you guys have, we do have another question. Sorry. Is Ashley Cundiff. She says, how do you approach sponsorship opportunities?
So I don't know how the sales team does it, but when I talk to potential clients, usually they're a guest or have some kind of affiliation, and I just say, hey, from my end of things, again, I'm not in the sales department. It's just, I think this could be a great partnership. Our listeners would use your product or listen to your show or whatever the company might be, and kind of go from there. Again, I'm not in the sales end of things, so I'm sure they have a better pitches and practices that I don't do. I kind of talk to them the same way I get some of my guests, which is just sliding into DMs. One of my recent guests, though, was a retailer, and I'm talking to them, trying to get them on to be a sponsor. So it's also just through who just talk it up.
Yep.
But I would talk to a sales team person for a better response than sliding into DMs.
With that said, let me go get the expert. I'll be back.
Anyone from Evergreen on here? Anyone want to chime in?
Forever Deshaun writes, any tips to do damage control off if you, sorry, let me read this correctly. Any tips to do damage control if you piss off a guest for some reason? I've seen some guests get reasonably upset and walk out.
Ooh, that's a good question. So, I mean, all you can try to do is just stay calm and try to talk them down. You don't know what their reasoning might be. It might just be their personality. They could just been triggered. All you can do is just stay kind, stay cool, collected, and apologize if it is necessary, which it might be. I don't really have anything better than just to stay cool and say, hey, I'd love to talk this out. Sorry if I offended you. Can we talk about this? And if they leave, they leave. You can follow up with an email or message them and apologize and find out why. But that's all you can do. It's kind of like any other relationship.
Yeah. In the immediate moment, if your show isn't live,
you can edit it out.
Just stop the show.
Yeah.
figure out what that looks like, and then continue forward. So
that's the beauty of not being live with your podcast.
Right. If you're not live, right. If you're live, then do exactly what you said. That's good. There is the link, by the way. Linda is posting the link for the Be On Air Podcast Network. If you have a podcast and you want help with dispersing your content, the Be On Air Network will definitely help you with that. The Be On Air Podcast Network, will be there to definitely help you with that, and we can give you more information on that as well. Leah, this hour went by so fast.
I know.
Jeez, I'm trying to. I'm looking at all my screens here, and I'm like, we're about to wrap this up. But no, it's been obviously great talking to you, and we do have a minute or two left. If anybody has one more question, we will definitely read it here on the forum. So please feel free to do so. But as we wrap it up here, Leah, while we're doing this, we all have a journey. We all have come from the very beginning, as like deer in headlights, going into the school and just saying like, I'm in this school, and it is what it is. I'm going to try to do this, right? It's not normal. It's not your regular 4-year university, 2-year college.
Yeah.
But what would you tell your younger self before you started this? But what would you tell them?
Before I started in media in general, or before podcasting?
Before media in general.
Ooh. I think I would tell my younger self, it's okay to be authentically you. I definitely feel like I had fear of showing my true self because, especially back, we're a little bit older. Back 20 years ago, there were certain ways you needed to be. And look at when even social media started. If you were caught with a beer in your hand on Facebook, you got fired. And now people get $1 million deals because it's like, yo, you look great with that beer in your hand on your Facebook post. It's like everything completely changed, right?
Yeah.
But I definitely feel like I held back being more myself than I, should have been or would like to have been. So I would hug that younger Leah and say, it's okay to be you. Like, people will hire you for being you. Yeah. You are, you're worth it. And don't be afraid.
Yeah. I would tell myself, you need to get you're too skinny.
Stop it.
I was a little too thick back then.
You know what I thought you were gonna say? Go get a haircut.
Oh my God, that's too. I know Linda's gonna pop on the screen at any moment now, and I was really kidding about the haircut part.
Am I on mute? Can you hear me?
You're not.
There you go. Now you're good.
Yeah. No, I already said something in the comments about the haircut because this is a bi-monthly event, which means you can mark your calendar.
I should know. I don't know why I haven't caught on yet.
Well, I think it's because you are that guy that always says yes. And Leah is also, occasionally, right, in life you have to say no to different things, but really the truth to making things happen is being that person that says, you know what, let's give this a try. Let's do this, change this. Let's, everything that you guys both talked about. And I think, in listening in the background, what I really enjoyed, Leah, you said a podcast, any of these conversations should feel like you're almost in somebody's living room or you're, out to dinner, or whatever it is that you're just relaxing, you're having a great conversation and you're sharing it, which probably circles back around to what you said you would tell your younger self, not to be as shy or to be a little bit more this or that. But I think that's the evolution over the last 5 years. We had COVID. Mm-hmm. We went into people's homes that usually perform on the stage. Yeah. We saw people without makeup. We saw them, with their families or kids running by, like the whole world really tilted a little bit. And that's why I think this format has just boomed. It's been coming for 5 or 6 years, but it's everything now for everybody that's listening, and grabbing a hold of that and running with it and being your authentic self is what's going to bring people around. Yeah. But knowing your niche too, mm-hmm. right? And that's something that changes and evolves. So
can I say something with that, Linda?
Yeah,
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
It makes me think of Field of Dreams. If they build it, they will come. Yeah. If you make it, they will listen. It's like, your people will find you.
Like that.
They will. Yeah. And we're so lucky because we do live in a time when the two of you were talking about all the different ways to share your content. And, really at the end of the day, it is work. None of this is without work. No matter what you do in life, right? Wherever your career takes you, you're going to work to get there. And in this arena, work looks like how the both of you talked about it. That's how your days progress. So really, thank you. It was so informative. And I encourage everybody as we, get to this end of the year to follow Leah. You can find her on LinkedIn. You can find her on Instagram. You can find her through her email. Learn more about the things that she's doing. Tony is another one, the Parley. He's been such a great resource this year with talking to our guests and talking about the things that he does in such a relatable way. Both of our guests come from the Be On Air network. They were trained a certain way. They've seen so many changes, so many evolutions. They are great mentors, great resources. And the beautiful thing is they are still learning. Like we never stop.
Never stop learning.
Right? So
never.
As we close out 2024, because this will be it until we see you in January of 2025. Thank you so much, Leah, for being our guest here tonight. And
Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, you're so welcome. And Tony, thank you so much for everything that you've done for our forum this year. It's just been a pleasure. And to everybody that's joined us, come circle back around in January. We're going to have a lot of great new folks here and some return guests. And let us know what you'd like to learn about. And that's what we'll bring you. So happy and healthy New Year to everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.